I'm joined here today by Julia Karnacz, Wellbeing Yoga and Mindfulness teacher and founder of Seedlings Wellbeing. Julia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. So, tell us a bit about Seedlings Wellbeing and how it came to be.
So, my background is primary school teaching and working with kids for many, many years, noticing how anxiety levels have been rising over the years significantly. And also as a yoga practitioner myself, those two worlds started to combine essentially. And I started to explore trying to use some of the techniques with kids that I was working with while I was working in schools. And then finally made the jump a couple of years ago and set Seedlings up.
Brilliant. And you work sort of in schools at the moment with young people?
Yeah, so I work, that's the dream actually, is to try and get well-being to be very much part of the curriculum, actually part of the national curriculum. So I go into schools and run wellbeing workshops both for the teachers, so whether that's training the teachers in how to deliver wellbeing elements within their day-to-day timetable, or actual wellbeing for the teachers who also need it, we all do, or actual activities for the children, so it could be a wellbeing day which includes yoga, mindfulness and creative kind of calming activities, so a whole fusion.
That's great. What I like is that you talk about how it can help a young person's emotional health, how it can help develop resilience, develop confidence, things like that. How does yoga and mindfulness in general help to develop those things?
So, I don't know if you practice yoga yourself, but in the sheer process of the physical movement within yoga, because it's a practice rather than something that you complete, say a gym workout, because you have to work at it and no pose is ever perfect, there's no such thing. You're constantly having to look at where you're at within that pose and improve it. So the resilience comes from continuing to practice and challenging yourself. So pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and trying that headstand, or maybe even if it's just trying to move a little bit lower when it comes to children trying poses. So just pushing those boundaries and feeling comfortable pushing those boundaries. So that's the yoga. And then with mindfulness, I mean, building resilience in terms of arming children with a toolkit so they are able to recognise emotions and understand that difficult times and difficult emotions pass, and building resilience in terms of being able to settle with their mind and during difficult times as well as calm times. So I hope I've explained that properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we were talking just before about how sort of yoga is kind of a form of mindfulness in a way. It's sort of a moving meditation. Whereas a lot of people, they find it difficult to sit with mindfulness and just be present in their own mind. It can get quite busy, you can get quite distracted, especially sort of the social media generation now, the sort of quick fix society that wants to just sort of things in 2-second kind of intervals. And with mindfulness as well, I think it's incredibly important. Like we were talking about sort of emotional intelligence, like cognitive control. If you can control your mind, it's going to be incredible for things like exams. Because I know a big part of exams is stress associated with that leads to poor performance.
Exactly. So part of what we do is give children, and adults actually, but ways in which to control their breathing, or ways in which to manage their breathing, which helps them to calm down. So that comes, it's part of the yoga, but it's part of the mindfulness as well. So particularly in times of stress, whether that's family or personal stress, or whether that's exams, they can access those techniques, and they're in tune with their bodies and their minds, and able to access that toolkit that they then develop in order to be able to manage those difficult situations.
And there's so many difficult situations that come up for a young person. So many things that can happen, and if they can manage their sort of emotions around that and their thought process, they're going to grow up to be sort of quite resilient individuals.
Exactly.
So it's good tools for life, I think, in general.
And also understand physically the way that stress affects us. So whether that, teaching them about the fight or flight response, how that in turn affects their breathing, how that affects their body, and if they have that self-awareness, they're able to then just do little things like shake their hands out or change the way that they're breathing and tell their body that actually everything's okay, calm them down, and they can perform, whether that's in an exam or just find a situation more manageable.
And do you make it mutually exclusive in the classes? Is the yoga separate to the mindfulness, or do you sort of fuse them together?
Fuse them together.
Yeah. So what would be an example of that?
So sometimes we do the yoga in complete silence. So I would, which sounds very serious, but it's not. So once they've learned to sequence, the mindfulness aspect, or the essential kind of moving meditation side of the yoga comes through, because then they start to practice and flow through that sequence, just focusing on their breath. So that's the sort of mindful element within that. So we do it through a story. Each workshop, because we do holiday workshops as well, would have a theme. So that story would be around that theme. It could be kindness, it could be being grateful, but also very child-friendly and imaginative. So they, and they're fully immersed in it. It's really quite wonderful to watch.
So do you notice a change? Do you work with people on a regular basis, or you do?
Yeah.
So how does it work? Do you run workshops or classes, or do you work one-on-one with people, or all of the above?
All of them, actually.
Yeah.
So one of my favourites at the moment is working one-on-one with children. I've worked with a number of children one-on-one, where either I go to their house or they come for sessions in my studio, and that's unbelievable. The effect, even within after one session, in the way that they're sleeping, for example, mums report back to me, parents report back to me, just in how they approach challenges. So when they're faced with something that's a little bit tricky, rather than immediately getting frustrated. And that's also, sorry to digress slightly, but where the growth mindset principle comes in. Because one of the trainings that I did as part of being a teacher in a school before was to do with language, and the language that you use with children. So I can't do this yet. So all of those things together, building resilience, makes such a difference. And the other thing is in anxiety levels, because they understand their breathing, quite quickly a result is very obvious, and they feel more in control. They feel like they can manage that feeling that no one really likes. We all get it, the butterflies and. Yeah.
But I think avoiding that and trying to sort of suppress it is what can exacerbate it and make it worse.
Absolutely.
So yoga and mindfulness, does that work to sort of embrace those feelings and actually become curious about them and
explore them. Explore them and not feel threatened by them, and actually understand them and say, this is why this is happening. This element in what's happening right now here is not something I'm not enjoying, or maybe it reminds me of something else. Okay, but I know what I can do to get through this and manage it. So, yeah.
And what sort of age ranges do you work from?
All the way. So in terms of just children, so from 4 upwards, so throughout primary and then teens as well. So I work with a 16-year-old girl as well as a 4-year-old, so I've got lots. And then we also we think wellbeing is important in terms of wellbeing for babies, so starting young, starting with baby massage, baby yoga, that kind of contact, that communication between the parent and the child. So it goes right back to the beginning, but yeah.
That's amazing. How would it vary from, say, a 4-year-old, for example, to a 16-year-old? Would you mix the class up? Do you do it slightly differently?
If it was one-to-one, then definitely.
Yeah.
But you can have them all together because, the older ones take the younger ones under their wing. But the methods are essentially the same. Perhaps the delivery is slightly, when they're younger, it's a little bit more animated, and sometimes when you're working with the teens, you're able to go into topics that are more age appropriate for them. So they may ask questions. But I do a weekly class, but also workshops, and within that it's 4 to 11 or sometimes 4 to 13, and that works quite well.
So the weekly classes are just generally ongoing, and the workshops, do you do a fixed period, or do you just
holiday times?
Holiday times.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
So parents have guilt-free childcare. So they can send their kids, and they come back and they're happy, and they feel they're armed with tools that they can use day to day, and they've hopefully had fun.
And is it weekly workshops?
Yeah, so they run for a few days at a time each holiday.
Brilliant. And you talk about mindfulness for parents, and is that something you consider to be quite significant? Is a parent being in tune with yoga and mindfulness and how their body works and things?
I mean, I think I'm a massive believer in it. And in an ideal world, in my ideal world, that would be everyone would access it, because I think it can do the world of good for everybody. But it depends on whether people are open to it.
And if you're in a sort of mentally well state, then you can assist and help someone else that might be struggling. And things like that.
But I think even more so people who aren't, and so many people walk around with anxiety that they're holding in, or depression, and luckily the awareness around mental health is becoming so much greater. But even just a few minutes of mindfulness meditation, and definitely yoga for physical and mental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you give us one example of a yoga exercise that you would use and one example perhaps of a mindfulness exercise? Not asking to do them right now, but just describe perhaps how it would go.
Okay, so a mindfulness exercise could be very simply making a mandala. So taking stones and just arranging them beforehand, closing your eyes and kind of grounding yourself and just breathing deeply, and then this is for children obviously, and just taking the time to create that pattern, that repeated pattern that you find everywhere in nature that's very soothing. Very, very simple. Or, well, there's obviously very different breathing techniques, so you're probably familiar with box breathing and those sorts of things. They're very simple techniques that you can use with even 4-year-olds. They love it, and they just focus on the physical, moving the in-breath and the out-breath. Nice and simple, mindfulness, age-appropriate, and something, again, that they can sit in their classroom if they're about to do a test and they could draw a little square on themselves as they breathe like that. They can use it anywhere. And then yoga is a little bit more challenging to use anywhere, but you can, if you're moving away from the breath, little things like arm stretches that help with when you hold lots of tension in your shoulders or your jaw, shoulder rolls, different movements from side to side. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Is that clear enough?
Yeah, no, that's very clear. Yeah, I was just thinking about the mandala exercise that you were talking about there. I was just visualising how that would sort of would work. It's very, very cool. Very cool. I think it sounds great. It sounds brilliant what you're talking about. I think
Thank you.
a lot of people do this separately, but the idea of fusing them all together, I think is really good because there is a lot of parallels between those things, and incorporating the mindset aspect of it as well, the growth mindset that we're talking about, the resilience, I think is fantastic. So I really hope that it does pick up in schools and does become part of the curriculum, like you said. So if people want to find out more about the work you do, where can they go?
They need to go to the website, which is, do you want me to say it?
Yes, please, yeah.
www.seedlingswellbeing.co.uk.
Brilliant.
And they can email me there or call me, the number's all there. And we'll send in an inquiry equally for schools, the same thing goes. If they want to have a wellbeing workshop or a wellbeing day or even some training. Another great thing, just to add, is because of my background as a teacher, what I do is I write curriculum-based schemes of work for schools. So they'll come in and say, okay, I'm doing one next week, in fact. I'm doing it for the whole school. So the year ones are covering Romans, say, or the year threes are covering, the reception class are covering Ready, Steady, Grow. And then I would take what they're covering and create a scheme of work around their topics so that it matches what they're already learning, so that then the yoga is actually fused in with their current topic, and it works quite nicely and complements it.
That's brilliant. And is it primarily London-based that you work, or do you travel around?
At the moment, London-based.
Just
Although
London-based.
there have been some people kind of contacting elsewhere, but just a small little team of people at the moment, so
Lovely.
hopefully it'll grow.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I hope it does. Thanks very much for joining us,
Thank you.
and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.